Born Primitive Outdoor is proud to partner with Montana Knife Company, Marsupial Gear, Evolution Outdoors, Sheep Feet, and Capture Gear. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsors. What's up, everyone? Happy Thanksgiving, which is actually, is it tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Happy early Thanksgiving. I just got back from trying to whack a deer and about missed the podcast between deer hunting and my dogs running away. But I have Gregg Farrell with Tactacam on the podcast today, who's going to answer a bunch of questions that I have, as well as hopefully for you. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron. Good to catch up.
Heck yeah, for sure. So I got some of your game cameras you sent out recently, and so as we kind of dive into this, I'm going to be asking you probably a lot of questions where you're probably like, are you shitting me, you don't know that? But before we get kickoff on that, how long have you worked at Tactacam? A little bit of background there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been in the general hunt industry for a little over a decade now. I started at First Light pretty early on. I think there was like 6 of us there, 2 of which were Kenton and Scott, the founders. So wore a lot of hats at that organization as it kind of grew and evolved, through different phases of that business. And then made the decision to leave there and come over to Tactacam Reveal about 2 years ago. So came over here and kind of started heading up the brand and marketing department on the cellular trail camera side for Tactacam.
So how much of just because I was there with, Kenton and Scott in the beginning at First Light, I say there, we were buddies and helped them out or whatever. So transitioning, when you left First Light, was that because the hands were changing? Was it just you wanted something new? Like, how'd that go?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, as organizations grow, inherently the goals of the organization have to change, right? Like a $1 million organization can't operate the same as a $10 million organization or a $100 million organization. And I think being there as early as I was, it was one of the greatest experiences I've had from a career perspective because, we were the small fish in a big pond, right? Like when you looked at what Kenton and Scott were trying to do, and frankly, eventually did do, putting us up next to brands like Sitka and Kuiu and some of the other bigs at the time, everybody there wore a lot of hats, right? We kind of all did everything, and it was really fast paced. And what's cool about an organization, it's kind of in startup mode from my perspective is there's so much white space in terms of what you can do, what you need to do, that you really get to make decisions based off of, what you feel is a white space in the market, right? Or what you feel can be improved upon, what problems you feel you can solve. And for a long time, right, that was kind of our North Star, our guiding light. It was stressful, it was a lot of work, but man, it was a lot of fun. And as that organization grow, when you go from 6 employees to 50 to 100, inherently things just have to change. And, one of the main things that I was tasked with eventually there, as we kind of evolved from just a Western company to also a whitetail company, was really standing up that whitetail line. I grew up in Wisconsin, cut my teeth on whitetails and turkey. So that was really my bread and butter. And for me, it got to a point where, I didn't necessarily feel like I accomplished everything, that we could possibly accomplish at that organization, but I had done a lot of it and I felt really good about where it had got. And it was just, I was ready for the next thing to kind of fuel my passion and ready for a change of pace and just something different. And I wanted to make sure that, I left on good terms while I still love the organization and the people there. And it didn't get to a point where, I wasn't satisfied with myself, what I was doing day to day, because I just wasn't as challenged or passionate about it. So made the decision to make the leap and, pursue something obviously still in the same space, but, pretty different category.
So how much, and I guess, from one question to the next, as far as how much of a transition was that? I mean, I guess for my, redneck kind of Western mountaineering dumbass or Western hunting, it would be a much bigger transition because I am not overly familiar with the market of game cameras. I'm assuming you had a pretty good handle on that, for you to go work for Tactacam, but was the transition rough or pretty smooth?
It was, I was a user of the product forever. I mean, I still remember the first trail camera I ever used, right? It was this giant contraption that had it was a flash camera that you still had to put film in, and there was a big battery box at the bottom of the tree. So I've been using the things forever, and all kinds of brands, right? Like before I started working here, I ran a bunch of Reveals, some Moultries, some Reconics. I'd use Cuddy Backs, I'd use Spy Points, like you name it, I'd used it. So from a consumer perspective, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on the market. From a business perspective, it's so different, right? Like, as you're very well aware of, the soft goods industry, it's a year-over-year turn where every year you're releasing new product. You're trying to innovate on fabrics and textiles and trims and fits. And you're kind of beholden to a lot of the suppliers in terms of like the manufacturers, who you're getting your insulations from, who you're getting your face fabrics from, etc. And then obviously there's a lot that can be done on the design side as well in terms of innovation. But here it's, the script is kind of flipped, right? Like at the end of the day, we sell a hard good product, but I would consider us more a technology company than truly like a product-based company, if you will. So I think from the end consumer perspective and the use case perspective and understanding the hunt space, I felt pretty well prepared. But it definitely was a transition, just, coming into a very different business model, going from, kind of soft goods to technology.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And it's weird with, as I dive into all kinds of different crap, right? When I say that, not just like in business, but from traditional archery, compound archery, rifle, fly fishing, it seems that every one of those industries has all of the same, if you take the pie chart of, you've got the shit talkers and the haters and the cult-like followers, and you've got it all. Like the guys that have never caught a fish that are starting podcasts talking about fishing. But I haven't, like, again, I'm not, on the cell phone game camera or game camera in general world, is there what seems to be like cult-like followings for Tactacam or for whoever, whatever other brand? Does that same thing happen in that space?
Yeah, it does. And I think I want to say we're lucky, right? But I think it was also, there was a lot of decisions made that went into what kind of got us here. But, I think, speaking of shit talkers, right? Like you want to find those, you jump on any forum online and you're going to find as many of them as you can possibly want to interact with on a daily basis. But one of the things that always blows my mind about this place is like, if you spend any time on, these forums or groups or whatever, there seems to be this, almost this like army of Tactacam and Reveal users that almost do the defending for us, right? When somebody says something or brings up an issue, it's like, you'll see 4 or 5 or 6 responses in response to that, right, that don't come from us. And I think a lot of that just has to do with kind of how this company was founded and the space that we found ourselves playing in, right? It's like Reveal's only about 5 years old. So realistically, Tactacam's been around for 10. The company started with the point of view cameras that you attach to your bow or your rifle or your shotgun. And eventually our founders saw a white space in the market where, at the time, 2019, 2020, the only cellular trail cameras on the market were super expensive. I mean, you're talking $300, $400, $500, $600. And in their mind, they're like, hey, we figured out this form factor of a really small camera that takes great video and great pictures. Can we apply this to a cellular trail camera that actually works, right? Does the things we want it to do, but isn't $600. And, I remember when Reveals came out, it was obviously before I worked here, but I had this like very guttural reaction of, there's no way this thing for $150 can do all that, right? But then it did. Like the product actually backed up what they said it was going to do. And I think because of that, we're lucky, but we kind of do have that to a certain extent, right? That cult-like following and that group of customers that's really passionate about the product we put out.
Yeah. And, like when I hunted whitetail in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and this was when I first started whitetail hunting. So early 2000s. If I'm remembering, it seems like Cuddyback was in Lone Wolf were like the cool kid camera. And I could be off. I'm going, my memory sucks, right? So, now it seems like there's probably more diversity in the tactical. Well, I say the cell phone game camera specifically, but game cameras in general. There's a lot more controversy of ethical. When I say ethical, Arizona banned them because there'd be 35 game cameras on one tree, right? And to me, it's definitely an Eastern Western thing, because you really don't ever hear about issues because it's all private land, whitetail hunting. But how much of a pain, I guess is what I'm leading up to, the laws of game cameras, specifically cell phone cameras, it is extremely diverse and every state is different. How much of a pain in the ass is that for you guys on a legal standpoint, or is it up to the user and you don't have to stress out about that?
No, I mean, we definitely pay attention to it, right? And it's really important to us because, frankly, we have no control over what these state agencies do or decide. So for us, it's in our best interest to work with them instead of against them. And I think you're spot on, right? Like, if you look at a map of our users, for example, like if you create a heat map of Reveal users, I mean, it's almost hysterical. Not hysterical. It's almost it's funny, right? Like, that line follows the Mississippi River, right? And like from the Mississippi east, the entire map would be covered. And from the Mississippi west, you get little pockets, but it's not as much coverage. And a lot of that, to your point, is exactly what you said, right? It's like Mississippi east are these traditional white-tailed turkey states. It's a lot of private land. In the public spots that do exist, right? Like it's more timbered, right? There's less like pinch points in terms of where people would hang cameras. So they seem to be less of an issue. And in the West, right, there are a lot of laws and regulations in certain states that either prohibit them or limit the use of them. But what we really tried to do, and I can give you one example, right, is, like I said, work with those state agencies to make sure that we're putting out a product that where it can be legal, we make it as easy as possible for our consumers to use the product and still be legal. So like, for example, in the state of Montana, you can have trail cameras out year long, but you cannot be receiving information from that trail camera actively while you're hunting. So historically, to be truly legal, right, like what you would have to do is you would have to go turn off your cameras or take your cameras, off the hill or wherever you had them before you went out and hunted for the season. So that's what a lot of people did. So one of the things we did recently is like on the app side of our product, we introduced this feature called Hunt Sync. And what Hunt Sync does is it allows you to go into the app and you physically break the connection between the app and the cameras themselves, and it timestamps when that connection is broken. So realistically, like if you were out in the field and a game warden stopped you, you could show them your app and you could say, hey, here's the timestamp, here's when the connection was broken. During that entire time you're out there, you will not receive any information from those cameras, keeping you legal. But when you get back to the truck or back to the house, you can basically just turn Hunt Sync off. And then the cameras will send you any of the information that they gathered while you're out in the field. So for us, it's really taking the more proactive route. Like the easy way out would be exactly what you said, right? It's like, well, this is a consumer problem. They have to figure it out. It's not our problem. We're trying to work with state game agencies and within regulations in the states we can to make it easier for consumers to use the product and not have to worry about those things.
Yeah, because here in Wyoming, I got to look, but I think they're illegal here. Now, having said that, they are handy also for your home. And you can get, and I know a lot of people do this because you can get obviously cameras at your house and everything else, but the cell phone game cameras, some of my buddies use them for they have them hidden to see who's coming in and out of their homes, and also for their hunting properties and everything else, which is, handy. And I don't, the big, I mean, it all boils down to what people consider to be ethical, right? Is a cell phone game camera ethical? And I, when you had sent me the game cameras and I knew you were going to hop on the podcast, and I started kind of going down the rabbit hole, and you said it earlier, like, forums, like if you want to hear anything, if you want to see somebody talk shit about something, go on a forum, you'll find it. But I think there's guys, Seek One production guys, or whoever, there's some guys that like literally right to their phone are tracking the deer walking to them, right? They know what corner it takes. And so you get, like traditional archers really take offense to that, and it's not fair chase and it's not ethical. And then on my perspective, like with my buddy Rotier, he's in South Dakota, he's an outfitter, and he can put his client on a water hole for antelope. He knows what's going to come in. He's, pretty good deals. So I think in the end, in my opinion, on private land, I think you should be able to do whatever the hell you want. Public land is where it gets really messy. So.
Yeah. And I think it's like so many of these things, right? I think it's like the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. And there's always some gray area with a lot of these things. And man, it's like, from my perspective, obviously this will sound biased coming from the chair I sit in. I work for a trail camera company. I'm very aware of that, right? But I think the same conversation could be had you brought up archery before, right? Like if you look at a traditional bow, whether it's a handmade longbow versus, the modern technology of compounds today, it's like, that's a pretty significant advantage, right? You look at things like even the bow sight world, right? Things from, what used to just be single pin fixed sights, and now we have sliders to, you have a Garmin that can range the actual, it's a rangefinder built into the sight. Even on the optic side or the mapping, like I think there's all these things where technology continues to improve, and frankly, it changes some people's perspective of like what's fair chase and what's not. And at the end of the day, for me, and this is just me anecdotally speaking, like I think it comes down to like what feels right to you and what doesn't tarnish the experience for you, as long as you're doing it legally and ethically, right? It's like, to me, game cameras are just another tool in the toolbox. I mean, I have a lot of cameras up in the Midwest, and I can't tell you how many deer every year, right? Like I get pictures of, but I still don't kill that deer, right? Like it helps me to have a better understanding of where that buck is, what he does, what his patterns are, how to hunt that deer. But at the end of the day, like I still think it comes down to, woodsmanship and understanding of the game you're chasing and the things you need to do right to make it happen. One of the ways I always like relate it to too is like the bass fishing world, for example, right? Like I'm not a huge fisherman, but I'm very aware of like what's going on there and the evolution that's happened with like forward facing sonar and, giant displays and things like that. And in my opinion, like myself, not being a bass fisherman, you could give me a $200,000 bass boat with all of the latest technology in the world. I'm still probably not going to catch that many fish because I don't do it very often. I don't necessarily know what bait to use for certain lakes, right? And like certain techniques and things like that. So even though the technology is there, it doesn't kind of guarantee that the outcome is the same versus somebody who is, lives and breathes and dies that stuff. And I think the same is kind of true for game cameras. Like it's definitely a tool. It's definitely useful. It's definitely helpful, but it doesn't replace the need for still the experience, right? And the woodsmanship and being able to actually go out and execute the pursuit. So from my perspective, I think that's what kind of balances out the whole like technology in hunting, whether it's cameras or lighted nocks or range finding bow sights, right? Or something else.
No, you bring up, and I'm so happy. I say happy. I love shooting a traditional bow, but I've kind of slowed down on that and actually picked up a gun more than I ever have recently. And no matter whatever one of these you dive into, traditional archery, somebody will be mad that you use a rangefinder, but then he's shooting carbon arrows, or, there's always something, and everyone's going to have their own personal kind of line that's, that's drawn. But, from my perspective, like if I went and put a cell phone game camera in the wilderness, is that going to affect my success, or if I'm going to go or not? Or no, it's not, right? Like whether I had 200, 300, 400-inch bulls on that, or I had like a bunch of 280 bulls, I'm still going to go hunting. And maybe that, pushed me to go or a little bit, but I mean, I'm still going to get out there. I think the only time I've ever kind of agreed with big issues on game cameras was Arizona, when you had 45 game cameras on one water hole. I could see how that might need to be limited. I just don't, everything. I mean, and I say that meaning it's just for the better of the wildlife, and people have trouble policing themselves as a whole, right? Like people are going to be like, maybe I shouldn't put a game camera here because there's already, 15 on the tree. But I mean, other than that, I don't see as many issues with it as some people maybe portray. I'd like to get your feedback on that, because that's the only time where I'd agree kind of with the Arizona thing, on certain places. Other than that, I really don't see an issue.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you, right? I think also, like you and I, we spend a lot of time in the woods every year chasing critters. A lot of your listeners are in the same boat. Like, I think we're very well aware of what it actually takes to be successful, right? And the way I always kind of explain this to, non-hunters or maybe people that aren't as experienced in this space is like, okay, if you came home from work one day and there was somebody in your bedroom, right? Like, you're probably going to notice that person there because you spend a lot of time there and you're very familiar with your surroundings, right? Like, as hunters, we're kind of doing the same thing. Like, even if you know where that animal is, like, they're so much more in tune to their surroundings in that area than we will ever be, because they're there 365 days a year. So yes, while we can use this as a tool to help us be more successful, like, it still doesn't guarantee any success, right? And I think you brought up a great point earlier. Like, if you had a camera out in the woods somewhere and, a bunch of 350 bulls or 280 bulls, like, does that change your experience going out, into the field? Like, for me, it really doesn't. For me, it almost adds to it, right? Because you actually see the things and you get to somewhat interact with the wildlife in a way that you wouldn't otherwise when you're not there. So for me, it adds a lot. It's more additive than taking away. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think in areas like you're talking about, or that specific situation in Arizona, it's like, I can see where something like that, like, takes away from the experience. If somebody walks up on a water hole and there's 40 cameras on it, right? Like, that doesn't feel as natural or as exciting as if you walk up on a water hole and there's no cameras on it. So I think you're right. Like, and I agree with you there. I think ultimately it comes down to people's ability or inability to kind of police themselves. And frankly, just like do what's right by other hunters when you're on public land, and frankly, the wildlife as well. So I'm pretty aligned with you there in terms of your interpretation.
Yeah. And I don't, everybody's different. A game camera is not going to really dictate the way that I hunt, how I hunt, whether I'm going or not. Like, I had 9 normal game cameras up in the wilderness this year. I say wilderness, I guess it wasn't. No, it was all on. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I had game cameras up and checked them and, did the thing and everything else. And, my season still sucked once it started, right? The rut wasn't great. I got to see lots of, so if I had a cell camera there instead, the only thing it probably would have made me is lazier potentially. Because I wouldn't have hiked in there as much, but I just would have hiked somewhere else and went fishing. And so it would have been more unobtrusive into the wild where they live if I would have had a cell phone game camera in comparison to going in and out checking, the SD cards. So it didn't really affect shit for me because I'd still go, right? Nothing's really going to change. I might just get a little fatter because I didn't maybe walk as much, but I also wouldn't be jacking with my hunting area as much because I wouldn't be, spreading my scent around to go check the SD cards. But some of the things it seems like people bring up with this are maybe a little bit more in La La Land. Meaning there's some hypotheticals I've seen brought up where I'm like, man, I don't know. You're really fucking reaching, right? That's
yeah.
So having said all that, I like your consumer. Is it like everything else on the whitetail world? You're 65-70% whitetail hunters and the rest kind of out west?
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely, more of our consumers are in the whitetail world. And I think ultimately, like, the product itself just lends itself to be a bit more useful in that space. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I think the product can be super useful for, elk hunters, mule deer hunters. I mean, even you brought up antelope earlier, right? Like, antelope, I think can be super useful for, but I think when it comes down to just the concentration of hunters and, even if you just look at license sales, right? It's like, okay, 90% of the license sales and dollars spent in the hunting industry are spent in whitetail specific states or on whitetail pursuits. Like, I think inherently, our consumer kind of just follows that trend.
Yeah, no, I kind of figured that. So on the actual game camera side, like, you shipped me some stuff, was, relatively self-explanatory, but kind of the system, like walk through, what do people need? What would they maybe want list? What do they need list? And what camera should they be looking at? Cause there's obviously the solar panels and the battery packs. What would you suggest for somebody getting started, kind of as a base kit to go off of?
Yeah. And that's one of the things where, again, like, I just want to reiterate, like, I used everything before I started working here. And I think every organization, every company kind of had their, their pros and cons. Like, there's always one thing that I liked about one or, camera versus another. But I will say, and I would have told you this before I started working here too, the thing that always brought me back to the Reveals was, like, as a full package, right? If you look at, like, if you have to choose one camera as a full package, these were always the ones that for me worked the best. They did the most, they were the simplest to use. They were the most reliable. So I think that's the thing where if you're new to this and you're looking, or not new to this, right? Like, whether you have one camera or 50 of them, I think one of the things that we've done really well as an organization is just it's a really easy product to use. And it's not, I think, like, technology itself can be intimidating. But frankly, I'm kind of an idiot. Like, I'm a bit of a knuckle dragger when it comes to technology. And, like, that's why I love these things, right? Like, you can go buy a camera off the shelf and within minutes, that thing is up and running. It's as simple as taking out the package, scanning a QR code from the inside of the camera door to your phone, and, like, you're up and running. So in terms of, like, my product kind of suggestion, maybe need to have, want to have, great to have situation. Like, if you're new to this, I would honestly just suggest, like, go pick up a camera, even if it's one of our, more, like, lower price point, like an X 3.0, for example. It is feature rich enough that camera will do everything you need to do and probably more. A lot of times I relate these cameras to, like, vehicles, right? Like, you drive a truck for 5 years and you probably only use 50% of the actual features in that vehicle. You didn't know 25% of them existed. Like, a lot of people will still have that experience even with, our lowest model camera. And you don't need anything else, right? Like, yeah, you got to throw some AA batteries in there, but other than that, like, you buy that package off that shelf and you have everything you need to get started. In terms of, like, moving up from there, I think from that point, choosing a camera that suits your needs. So, for example, like, our lowest level camera doesn't have on-demand video. Our higher level, our middle level cameras do. And when you get into our highest level camera, you can even live stream if you want to. So the camera model itself, I think, depends on what type of user you are, right? Are you a power user that wants all these features or needs all these features? Or are you somebody like my dad, for example, right, who is 60 plus, loves to hunt, but frankly, at the end of the day, like, all he wants to do is see pictures and videos? He could use any camera model he wanted. And then beyond that, like, in terms of the accessories, right, I think that really comes down to just, like, where you're putting these things. For me, like, if I ever have the opportunity where I'm going to have a camera in a place where it's going to get sunlight, adding a solar panel is a no-brainer, because at that point, the camera almost becomes self-sufficient in the fact that, you don't really need to go and ever change batteries, because that camera will keep itself powered, especially if you add something like a lithium power pack instead of AA's, just because it's so much more efficient. But beyond that, I think the cool thing about about our cameras is like, you don't need a whole lot, right? And in the old days, cellular cameras were a lot more complicated. Like when you bought that camera, you had to decide, do you want a camera that has a SIM card that connects to Verizon signal? Do you want a camera that has a SIM card that connects to AT&T, so on and so forth? At this point, like all of that is out the window. So when you turn one of our cameras on, we have auto connectivity, multi-carrier is what we call it. So basically what that means is you flip the camera on, it'll automatically start scanning for signal, and whatever signal it finds that's the strongest, might be AT&T, might be Verizon, might be US Cellular, et cetera. It just connects to that. We deal with paying for the service on the back end, and you just pay your monthly subscription. Doesn't matter at all what your cell phone is connected to. That has nothing to do with that at all. So for you as the end user, you're like, oh, cool, this is costing me $5 a month or $8 a month. You might have 3 cameras connected to AT&T, 3 cameras connected to US Cellular, 3 cameras connected to Verizon. Doesn't really matter, right? So as the technology has evolved, I think we've simplified a lot of what used to be the pain points with cellular trail cameras. I mean, even SD cards, for example, right? Like you're a photographer, you get this, more than most. Like SD cards are always the bane of my existence when it came to trail cameras, because you'd have to reformat them, or if the camera needed a firmware update, you'd have to put it on an SD card and then download on the camera. Like our cameras now, they have SD card slots if you want to use them. But I haven't run an SD card camera in any one of my cameras in the last 3 years, because we have internal storage on our cameras now, so you don't need it. So I think a lot of those things, right, have gotten a lot better, and just made the end user experience a lot better and a lot easier.
So with looking like, because I kind of whatever, when people ask me about these things, once I start talking to them, like to be speaking relatively intelligent. We price wise, even with all the bells, whistles, and gadgets, if you've got 2 cameras and extended antennas and solar panels, you're still probably in the $400 range for both cameras, fully loaded with as much shit as you could possibly come up with. Is that a true statement? Did I look at that correctly?
Sorry, you cut out there for just a second, Aaron. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, no. So I like to speak intelligently of products once I start playing with them, right? And so I kind of looked through pricing and everything else, and really with 2 cell phone game cameras, all the bells and whistles, extended antennas, anything you could possibly get for them, you're still well under $400 with every possible option. I from what I was looking, is that correct, or am I talking to my ass?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, so like, I can rattle off a few prices here, but like if you go with, let's say, our X 3.0 model, right, you're looking at like right about $120 for a camera. An extended range antenna, for example, which 99% of people are not going to need. I mean, I have areas where I can't get a text out, and my camera does just fine without an extended range antenna. But even if you would want to use one of those products, right, you're talking sub $20. Solar panels, right, about $50. So yeah, to your point, it's like you start adding that up and you could really have like a decked out system for sub $200. And to be honest, probably 75% of users won't need a lot of those other accessories just because of the way they use them. So you're in that sub $150 per camera, basically for all in for everything you need to have that thing run.
Yeah, and then what is I think you mentioned it before, but what is your monthly subscription? What does that cost?
Yeah, so we have different tiers. And the reason we do that is we really want to have the consumer essentially be able to a la carte what they want or need. So the tiers are really based off of how many photos or videos you want your camera to be able to take. So for example, like, our lowest plan is $5 a month. Our most expensive plan is $10 a month. From $5 a month, you're going to get, 250 photos and videos, et cetera. Where $10 a month, you get unlimited. Now, realistically, like that just depends on where you're going to put the camera. If you have your camera over a feeder in Texas, like that thing might be taking 400 photos a day, right? If you get your camera, or if you have your camera on just a travel corridor or a pinch point, right, on, some timbered ground, say in Minnesota, your camera might only be taking a few pictures a day. So really like the differentiation and price point of data plans. You can kind of a la carte that based off of what your needs are, where your cameras are actually going to be put, aka like how many pictures they're going to be taking.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next question, and this is something I have personally, and people have asked me, for security, and I know you have a more of a security type camera, and I say security, whether that's a little hidey hole that you have for your house, it's your hunting shack, whatever, whether, and I say hunting shack, that could be a log cabin in Colorado, or that's a true kind of more primitive hunting shack. It seems to me like it's just how would I put your security game camera compared to a cell phone game camera is kind of just how it looks and a little bit of the options it has, but you could use one for the other. I'm saying that, I'm asking that, I'm not saying that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're 100% on the right track. Really, the reason we came out with a security-based cellular camera is because of how many times we heard people were using our trail cameras for security cameras. And a lot of that just comes down to logistics of what it takes to get a security camera running, right? Like a true security camera, like a Ring or a Blink or something like that. I mean, you need you need power to it, right? You also need internet service. So whether that's internet service via Wi-Fi if the place is hooked up, or a Starlink system or whatever, like there's a lot of things you have to have in order to get a true quote unquote security camera up and running. So in these instances that you're talking about, like a lot of times those places might not have power, or even if the homestead itself, like let's say you have a hunting cabin and the hunting cabin has power, but the gate off the road could be a mile away. There's no power at the gate, right? So you find yourself in these situations where true security cameras just like weren't realistic. And that's why people started using the game cameras. So to your point, what we did was we said, hey, like, if you guys are using this for security, we can actually build you a better product that's more security specific. Now, I'm by no means saying that you couldn't use one for the other, or, both for each, but you will notice certain things in our security line, whether it's the features of the camera, the way it's hung, the way it looks, even the features of the app. They're definitely more tailored to security. So for example, like the new 360 camera we came out in our security line, it's a really cool camera for security. Might not be the best for hunting just because the way that thing moves and the way the shutter works and stuff like that, like there's a little bit of noise to it, right? Where our trail cameras are, 100% silent. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can't use Reveal for security, or you couldn't use a Defend camera as a game camera, because that's just not true. I think it's like what they're optimized for is really like where the difference lies.
And with, like you said, for $10 a month, and I'm asking this because obviously I'm going to use my cameras for all kinds of different shit. You could technically, like, and people have asked me this a ton, you go to a trailhead, you have service, you could technically just throw that game camera up on your vehicle hidden to see if anybody breaks in your shit, and then move it, no problem.
100%. Yep. 100%.
And I think people were having a little bit of trouble wrapping their head around that, because it's like mobile Starlink, right? As long as there's cell service, you're good. And so I know a lot of guys get worried about vandalism, maybe from anti-hunters, theft. It is a pretty, for $10 a month, one hell of a safety option if you're traveling around, parking your vehicle, a lot of trailheads and things like that. It's a good option, I think, but I'd like to get your feedback on that as well.
Yeah, it's a great option, right? And I think the cool thing is, like, you hit the nail on the head. It's like if you have service, and that doesn't mean if you have service on your cell phone, right? Because your cell phone, you chose a service provider for your cell phone, and they might not have towers in the area. So maybe you don't have cell service on your cell phone, but your buddy who's got a different service provider does. And again, like that goes back to that like auto connectivity, multi-carrier feature of our camera where like, and I'm not exaggerating this, there are places, and we hear this every day, where, people couldn't get other cameras to work, or they can't get their cell phone to work, and like these cameras will connect and send photos. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that like anywhere you go, these cameras are going to work, but there's a lot of places that they work that even cell phones don't work. So it's a great option for, like you said, $10 a month, $5 a month, whatever. And we have all kinds of different plans. You know, if you want to do monthly, you can do a monthly plan. If you want to do yearly, you can save a little bit of money. If you want to save a little bit of money on your month-to-month cost, you can do a yearly plan. Or if you're, if the instance you talked about where it's like, hey, I just want to use this thing to watch over my truck on public parking lots during, elk season, like you could just pay for a month of data during September. So you really have a lot of options that are pretty easy on the wallet.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like I said, I kind of went down the deep dive of a lot of the things that you've mentioned. The service thing popped up a lot, where people brought up like this thing works in places that I had no idea would work because the cell phone is bad. The cell service is bad. But as we're kind of, how does that work? So you you get an update on your phone. You can watch what's going on real time, more or less.
Yes. For example, like you can choose if you want, anytime that camera takes a photo, it automatically sends it to your phone right away. That's one option. That's a great option for like in the minute, like detail or information. Like if you want information right away. The other thing you can do is like, if you want to save on battery life for your camera, you can choose to have that camera take photos for a 24-hour period, right? And then send them to you once a day. So in a situation like you were talking about, like way back in the wilderness, right? Or maybe it's not even way. You have a whitetail property that's 3 hours away. You might not need real-time data, so you could choose to have those photos sent to you once per day versus each instant and extend the battery life of your camera. Or like if you wanted to, right, like on that lower price point camera, one of the options you have is when you receive a photo, or it doesn't even have to be when you receive a photo. Let's say you receive a photo and then you want to manually force the camera to take another photo. You can choose to have it take an on-demand photo. Now, if you go up to our next level of camera, let's say you receive a notification that, your camera takes a photo, and let's go back to the instance you were talking about where it's looking over your truck in a parking lot. Let's say you got a photo of somebody messing with your truck. With our Pro model camera, you could actually then force that camera to start an on-demand video. So it would start taking a video at the moment that you request it, or, it would record a video for up to 30 seconds or whatever you set the time to, and then send it to you. So that's kind of what we call on demand. Now, if you go with our highest level camera, which is called the Ultra, that is true live view. So in that case, let's say you got the photo of somebody messing with your truck, you could push that camera into live view right from the app, and it would automatically start live streaming what's going on in the actual minute, or in the actual second, excuse me. So basically from like lowest level camera to highest level camera, the feature set kind of gets more robust and increases. But in all those cases, right, you have the ability to either have the camera take photos on its own or actually force it into photo or video mode, depending on the model of camera you have in real time.
So we're diving down this rabbit hole. Where is actually a good place for people looking for info, above and beyond this podcast? They want to hop off the podcast and start researching. Is there a forum that you recommend? Or are there videos on YouTube? Like, what's a good place where people can kind of break this down even further? Yeah.
So honestly, like the easiest way to, I think, visualize it as quickly as possible, like if you just go to Tactacam.com, you click on the cameras link on our page, and you scroll down, like just below where all the product pages are, we have a comparison chart on there, and it'll show you all three models of camera we have and what the capabilities are. So you'll see, which capabilities all cameras have. And then as they start to get specific to a camera towards the bottom of the list, right, you can see it there. So I think from like a 30,000 foot view, if you're just trying to figure out like what features actually matter to you and what ones don't, some people, for example, they'll never use live view. So don't pay extra for a camera that has live view, right? Like get the one that's a little less expensive that has the features you want. I think that's a great place to start. Otherwise, like our YouTube channel, we have a ton of videos on there. Reveal Cellular Cam on YouTube, tips and tricks, setup type videos, use case type videos, things like that. And then, beyond that, and this is what I always encourage people to do, is like, if you jump on, if you're a Facebook user, there's a million Facebook groups out there like Trail Cam Junkies and Reveal Trail Cam group and things like that. Like, those are places where it's not even specific to our brand. It's just more general to trail cameras across the market space. And you can get a lot of really good information there from different folks. This is like a little plug for us too. And it's important for us. And this is why we do it and why I bring it up. Like, I don't want this to sound sales pitchy at all, but I do think one of the cool things about our organization is like how much we prioritize customer service. We have like over 200 customer service agents that actually work for our company. They're not a third party. We don't, source this out overseas. They're all end users of the product. So even if you don't own a Reveal, let's say you're looking at making a purchase decision, but like you just have questions, or maybe you do own a Reveal. If you just call our general customer service line, like, you'll get a real person on the phone who's actually a trained expert in these things and can answer all your questions, whether you need help with your camera or you're trying to make a purchase decision. Like, you don't have to go through a phone tree of automated messages and end up like at a voicemail somewhere. But these people they're awesome. They're experts. Like, I use them when I have questions or issues, right? Like, they know more than I do about this stuff. So that's another really good resource. Like I said, whether you're a current customer of ours or not, give those folks a call and like they can always help you out.
So what do you think is going to be the next evolution? Can it get any better than it is?
I think so. It's funny.
Can you talk about that again?
Yeah. I was actually having this conversation yesterday with somebody else, ironically, but and this is, mind you, this is my opinion, right? Like, not necessarily the opinion of the organization that I work for, but I think where the big innovations are going to come in this space is truly on the technical side, like on the app side, the software side of what the capabilities are of these cameras and like the full ecosystem, right? Like, and I don't say that meaning that hardware is not going to continue to improve. I mean, I'll say what I can without getting, the new cameras we have coming out next year. And I know everybody says this, but like I've been testing them for a while now, and it's like the feature improvement on those versus our current models, like, it's night and day difference. They're incredible. But I think just like anything, right? Like, on the hardware side, on the physical product side, you are beholden to improvements of all the different components. So whether it's lenses or PIR sensors or components of the circuit board or, certain physical features of the form factor, right? Like, improvement on the hardware side is always limited by those things. But man, like, the software side is just the Wild West right now, right? Like, we are in the exponential growth portion of the curve in terms of improvement there. So I think in terms of advancement, right? Like, yes, the hardware side of the product we build will continue to get better and advance every year as the technology of the components does. But I think the really big leaps and jumps and, from the stuff we're testing and developing now, the exciting stuff is truly on the software side and the capabilities you're going to have to impact what this thing does, how it helps you plan a hunt, execute a hunt, be prepared for a hunt, right? Or even just interact with the hardware. I think that's where the major improvements are going to be in the future.
Do you see the government cracking down, when I say this, Fish and Wildlife, cracking down and making cell phone cameras illegal across the board ever?
I think it's a great question. I think it's going to be like anything in our space. Like, I think that certain agencies are slower to adopt, right? I mean, there are states where you couldn't shoot lighted knocks until last year, right? Like, how long have lighted knocks been out in the product space? So I think like there's going to be situations where certain components or certain features of what we do, there might be states or agencies that are slower to adopt that. But I think, just like anything else in the space, like, we're really working with those people to make sure that we're building a product that, folks in those states can still work with. And we're not crossing the line in terms of, the evolution of this technology outpacing the customer's readiness for it, right? Or even impacting their ability to use it and stay legal. So I don't have a crystal ball, right? Like, I don't I don't necessarily know all the answers to where, from a government perspective or legality perspective, things will land. But I do know that, like, we have employees in this organization that specifically, that's their job, is to talk to and work with and have open lines of communication with those folks to make sure that we are up to speed and aware of any of those changes that are coming down the pipe, so we can work within, kind of the realm of it.
Yeah, and I don't. When you dive down the technology rabbit hole, it's like, well, if you're going to take that away, then, I mean, when I say that, like mapping software and rangefinders, there's a lot of things I think are probably, when it comes to ethics, are probably much worse than a cell phone game camera. This is my own personal opinion. I'm probably going to get hate for that, but I wouldn't care if a dude had 10 cell phone game cameras. You take his rangefinder away, you've taken his life from him. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm like, in reality, like, if you really wanted to protect the harvest, make rangefinders illegal, because it's not the cell phone camera that's really going to make as big of a difference as a rangefinder or mapping software. And so you dive down that rabbit hole, it can get pretty violent. People get pretty serious about that shit. And then when I say that, like, there's a lot of anger words thrown across the board, but I'm always like, okay, well, let's be real here. Let me take your GPS. Let me take your rangefinder. Let me take those things away and see how big of a difference that makes compared to if I pull Gregg's Tactacam from him. Yeah, they help, but there's a lot of other things that help a lot more. I feel personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much more low-hanging fruit, right? Like, if you just look at the impact that, and I guess I'm going to jump on your, I'm signing myself up for hate mail bandwagon here, right? But, like, the impact of motorized vehicles, like people's ability to get to spots or get game out of spots based off of, like, motorized vehicle laws, right? Or even what's going on in the drone space now, right? Like, there's so many other things that I think, I mean, you named a lot of them, right? But there's so many other things that truly, if you're looking out for the health of the species itself, right, and reducing harvest rates, that could impact that more so than game cameras. And I don't say that as a way to, like, excuse us from the equation, right? Like, I think it's still good to have the conversation and have a hard look at yourself and make sure that, you're not trending the wrong direction. But I think you're right. Like, I think there's a lot of things that have a much greater impact on success rates, right, if you will, than a game camera.
Yeah, and I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm when I say that, I don't have, I'm not dying on they're dying on the cross for a game camera. I don't give a shit, right? I just, being a outside party looking in, if somebody was complaining about game cameras, it would be very difficult for me, whether I was doing a seminar or whatever. I'd be like, all right, I'll, raise you this, right? It's like, okay, well, if you're going to bring these up, I think we need to take a step back. And if you're that concerned, look at all of these other things that are currently legal that are much worse if you're looking at, fair chase or whatever. And that's my own personal opinion, and I guide a lot. And so when you take a rangefinder from a person, you have literally just taken their firstborn child. Like, it is not good, especially archery or longer range shooting rifle.
Totally. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I was just going to say, I think, we've focused a lot on the potential negatives of these things too, which I think is fair, but there's so many potential positives, or not even potential, but positives that come from these things too, that, like, I think actually the good outweighs the bad in terms of the outcome for the species, right? And the longevity of this pursuit that we all participated in, even from a guide's perspective, right? Like, when you're guiding clients, your goal is always I shouldn't say always, right? Most of the time to take, mature age class animals that are past their breeding prime, if you will, right? And for you as a guide to be able to know what those animals are, how many of them there are, where they're located, right? Like, ultimately, that's way better, not only for, you and your hunters, but also the species, than just going out there and shooting the first, large antlered animal you see, because you don't know what else is out there, right? Or I can give you another example. It's like, one of my friends and a gal that works with us lives in Southern Ohio, and her place, it's a farm that she lives on that they manage exclusively for whitetails. They put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it every single year in terms of property improvements and food plots and maintenance and things like that. Like, they got hit super hard by EHD this year, and they were able to kind of manage that or understand the health of the herd and how bad EHD was on that property based off of the cameras they were running. And they were able to make the decision not to hunt that place, right? Because ultimately, like, it wasn't a sustainable thing to do this year. So they went elsewhere and hunted. So I think there's a lot of these examples too, like the one I just gave, or, the understanding of what animals are out there from a guide's perspective, where it actually helps the outcome of the species itself way more than it hurts it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, as far as on the guide outfitter side, and I'll use antelope, you want your client to have fun and be successful. You want them to come back. You want them to have a good trip. And so it is, whether ethical or not, it does improve upon the experience of the hunter, knowing they're probably going to see a few antelope their first day. They're not going to sit in a blind at 100 degrees, sweating their ass off, and see nothing. And you can, again, that it makes it easier for the outfitter to have a better experience for the hunter with a cell phone game camera. You can still do it with a normal camera. You kind of do it scouting, although if you have enough water holes. So I don't think it's a bad thing, because someone's going to shoot something on that water hole no matter what. They just might do it a little quicker, and you can be a little bit more advanced with your technology where you're going to put people, and I don't see anything wrong with that, again, especially on private land. If you've got 200,000 acres and you're guiding on that and outfitting, I can tell you, I would not stand on and plant my flag in the ground of fuck no, I'm against cell phone cameras, put me at the water hole no one's looked at, comes out of no one's mouth ever, right? No one is going to say that. I'm going to be like, has the camera shown? Is there quite a bit of antelope coming in? Am I going to get to see one today? I don't know anybody that would argue that point to say, no, I want to sit on the water hole where no one has any idea if antelope are coming to it.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more from the perspective of either the potential client or the guide, right?
Yeah, and I only bring that up as, I mean, in reality, if someone's complaining about cell cameras and then they book an antelope hunt, I highly doubt when they get there, they're going to say, no, don't put me on that water hole because you have a cell phone game camera and can guarantee, an antelope's going to come in by noon. And again, I may be looking at this totally ass backwards, but from somebody who guides and has, helped different outfitters and hunted, I just don't see, especially on private land, anything wrong with cell phone cameras. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of emails from this podcast, because I'm also somewhat speaking out of my ass, because I'm not in this world. I just, from what I've seen and everything else, the only real negative side, again, is whether it's cell phone or normal cameras, was in Arizona, where the water holes were getting beat up pretty good. But on the whitetail side of things, like, back east, Midwest, they're pretty much a standard. They're not illegal anywhere Midwest and back east, are they? Well,
yeah, there's certain
roughly.
Yeah, they're not.
I'm not asking you to sign. If somebody gets arrested, don't blame Greg. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not pretending to have all the answers for every state. I do know there's a few states like Iowa, for example. I know there's some like specifics within the law with requirement to usage on public versus private. Like, there's some differences there, but in terms of what I'm aware of, right, like, there's no places where they are 100% illegal. And again, don't quote me on that, but I think, generally when you get east of the Mississippi, there's a lot less to worry about in terms of, state regulations or use regulations in terms of cellular trail cameras.
Gotcha. I know, like Colorado, they're legal up until season starts. I think they're illegal in Wyoming. And so, one of the things that, again, it gets brought up or whatever, like people do your research, right? Just don't listen to my dumb ass. Gregg's intelligent, but don't listen to him either. And do your research, make some phone calls if you're about to use them. Make sure you're not going to get yourself into trouble, and especially out west. But we've hit an hour here. Is there anything you want to add that I'm like totally missing on with questions and everything else that pops to mind?
Man, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of it here. I think it's one of those things where, and I think I was actually having this conversation with somebody yesterday too. I think the cool thing about them too is like we talk about them a lot from the perspective of hunters, which, we all are. And for me, like what I've found with these things is, there's a lot of opportunity to add to the pursuit, just in even the excitement of it, right? Like, when you go out and sit in the woods, and I have this experience a lot, and actually I tallied it for a couple of years because I was curious. A lot of the spots that I sit from a whitetail perspective, like I have a camera close by, and I was always curious, like of the number of deer that I would see in a sit, how many of those deer did I actually get pictures of, right? And it's surprisingly low, because if you have a camera in a general area, there's a lot of places that animal can go that you can see from that tree stand that you might not get a picture of that animal. So I think one of the benefits, right, or the fun things about these as a tool is like, yes, they're a tool, and yes, when used the right way, they can help you be successful. But I don't, even me being in this industry and somebody who lives and breathes this stuff, it's like I don't get to spend as much time in the woods as I would like to on a given year, but it's a cool way to continue to interact with and feel like you're a part of what's going on out there, even when you can't be there. So yeah, it's great for the intel, and it's great for the pursuit, and it's great for being a tool in your toolkit. But even beyond that, I think like they are fun to have and fun to use, just from the perspective of like staying motivated and staying excited, and kind of having like every time you go out in the woods, like you're not going to see that, that number one hit list buck you have, but he's out there because you've got pictures of him. Or even the other cool shit you see too, right? Like the number of wild photos we get of, bobcats mid-air snagging a bird out of the air, or
Sasquatch,
coyotes fighting, or all kinds of weird shit that you would just never see if you didn't have cameras out there. Like it's a fun tool to have in the toolkit, and way to interact with the spots that you hunt or spend time in nature, when you can't be out there. So if you haven't used one, even if you're not interested in necessarily using it from a hunting pursuit perspective, like I encourage you to try it out, because frankly, it's a fun activity and a cool thing to have at your disposal.
No, I agree. And I mean, I'm just getting one set up here on my property, just because it's like the war daily with my two dogs chasing after the fox. I think even the fox has fun with this, but it's kind of cool to see what's tripping around in the canyon. I don't hunt out here. I'm not planning on hunting, but to see what's going in and out of the canyon. As far as just, is there wolves ever in there? Is it just coyotes? Does a mountain lion cross through? And it's cool. I mean, it gives you something to do, and then what the hell's actually crossing through your property. So.
Yeah, exactly. And they've gotten so easy to use, right? It's like, it's a pretty low barrier to entry in terms of financial investment and or time. So whether you're throwing one in your backyard, like you're talking about, a place you'd never hunt, right? Or you have 50 of them on your hunting property. It's like I said, we've gotten to a point where the barrier to entry is pretty low, both from a time suck and financial standpoint, that it's kind of cool. Like it's almost become a commodity item, right? In the realm of hunting. It's like, yeah, you need certain things like your weapon of choice, whether that's a bow or rifle, right? Potentially some glass, a rangefinder, things like that. But I think these trail cameras have worked their way up closer and closer to the top of, the purchase decisions that people make, because they can be such a useful tool, and the barrier to entry is pretty low.
No, I agree. Well, Gregg, I appreciate you coming on. I wasn't sure how this would go, and not meaning like you as a person, like whatever, but I mean, I'm like, can I pull off an hour of cell phone game camera? But this went super smooth and answered a ton of questions for me as well, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on here, and fun to see you guys put the cameras to use this year. I'm glad you got some use out of them. And yeah, always happy to hop on and talk about cameras, or if you guys got any questions as the season goes on, or even if your listeners come back with any questions too, and you need me to follow up, happy to help out there.
Cool. Yeah, we may do a round 2, honestly, depending upon what feedback I get, man. So thanks. I appreciate you hopping on the podcast. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Don't get too fat. And if you do, go to the gym. And again, thank you for hopping on, and appreciate Tactacam and everything you guys do. You definitely seems like the corner in the market. So it's been a great podcast.
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron.